Picture this. You are on a ship. Beneath your feet, the deck shudders. Not because the engines are straining, but because the ocean is pushing up from below. In front of you, there is nothing. No coastline, no lighthouse, no port on the horizon. Just water. Thousands of kilometers of black water rolling beneath an iron-gray sky. Behind you, Cape Horn has just disappeared into the fog. Ahead, days of sailing away, Antarctica is waiting. You are in the Drake Passage. Here, the ocean does not negotiate. It sets the terms. 500 nautical miles. That is the distance between the tip of South America and the South Shetland Islands, at the gateway to Antarctica. On a map, it looks like an ordinary strait, a corridor between two landmasses. But this corridor is the most violent stretch of ocean this planet has to offer. Around Antarctica, at these extreme southern latitudes, there is almost no land to block the movement of water. The African, American, and Australian continents all stop well short. What remains is a free, continuous ring of ocean circling the globe without interruption. And through that ring flows the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. It is the only major ocean current on Earth that never collides with a continent. It turns without stopping, from west to east. It carries between 100 million and 150 million cubic meters of water every second. Every river on the planet combined carries less. When that flow reaches the Drake Passage, it narrows into a funnel. A colossal volume of water is forced between two land masses closing in on each other. Speed increases and the surface intensifies. And on top of all that, the wind arrives. Between 40 and 60 degrees south latitude, dominant winds blow west to east without pause. Sailors gave them names that say everything. Roaring 40s, the furious 50s, the screaming 60s. These winds travel thousands of kilometers before reaching the passage. Along the way, they build waves. Long, deep, slow, powerful swells. When those swells meet the locally driven surface chop, the two systems collide. The surface turns chaotic. A ship does not rise anymore. It gets thrown in every direction at once. Waves in the passage routinely exceed 9 to 10 meters. In the strongest systems, they climb past 15 meters, and beneath the surface, the seafloor drops in places to more than 4,000 meters. No continental shelf to absorb the energy. No shallows to break the waves early. No shelter. Add icebergs drifting north from Antarctica, visible on radar if they are large, invisible if they are small. Add low-pressure systems racing around the pole. When pressure drops here, wind can go from moderate to storm force in hours. Icebergs can make a crossing deadly. A captain does not have minutes to react. He has seconds, and there is nowhere to go. No coastline, no shelter. Once committed to the crossing, there is only one direction possible: forward. For 5 centuries, ships have entered these waters. Wood, iron, steel. Some crossed without incident. Others never saw land again. But the strangest thing about the history of the Drake Passage is this: the two men whose names it carries never went there willingly. They were thrown into it by the storm. It is 1525. Spanish ships are working their way along the South American coast, searching for a route to the Pacific through the Strait of Magellan. One of them is commanded by Francisco de Hotsis. Exiting the eastern entrance of the strait, a violent storm strikes the fleet and drives his ship south, much further south than planned, further south than the charts suggest is even possible. And there, through the spray and the wind, the crew sees something unexpected. Open water. Not a coastline, not the edge of a southern continent, an expanse of sea stretching beyond Tierra del Fuego. At the time, most European maps still showed a vast southern landmass, the Terra Australis, believed to connect with South America. What Hocus was seeing suggested otherwise. He had not gone looking for a new corridor. he had been forced into one. They survived the storm and turned north again. Spanish sources call these waters the Mar de Hoses. The name never spreads beyond Spanish circles. Half a century later, an English privateer would enter these same latitudes. Sir Francis Drake leaves England with 3 ships. His objective is not exploration. It is raiding Spanish interests in the Pacific. Exiting the Strait of Magellan, the storm hits. The Marigold is lost with all hands. The Elizabeth turns back, and Drake's own ship, the Golden Hind, is driven south into waters no English vessel has ever charted. Like Hokas before him, Drake had not gone looking for a new passage. The storm had thrown him into one. But the experience confirms something essential. There is open sea below South America. A navigable route exists around Cape Horn, wider than the Strait of Magellan and far more dangerous. English accounts associate his name with those southern waters. Over time, this corridor between continents becomes the Drake Passage. The irony is simple. Neither Hokas nor Drake went there willingly. Both were blown in by the wind, and neither truly understood the scale of the forces moving through that place. It takes until 1616 for a ship to cross those waters intentionally. Dutch navigator Willem Schouten sails south of Tierra del Fuego, discovers a new cape at the continent's edge, and names it Cape Horn. From there, he deliberately steers into the open ocean and successfully completes the full crossing. Unlike Hokas and Drake, Schouten had not been pushed into these waters. He chose them, but proving it could be done did not make it safe. It only meant more ships would try, and they did. Merchant vessels, naval squadrons, whalers, all entering the same corridor. Over 3 centuries of sail, historians estimate that close to 800 ships and more than 10,000 sailors were lost in these waters. Many of those losses were never documented. There was no coastline along most of the passage, no rescue stations. Radio did not exist yet. A ship could leave port, vanish in the southern storms, and simply never return. No wreckage found. No final log entry, just the assumption that somewhere in those vast waters between South America and Antarctica, another vessel had been taken. But sometimes, certain stories did survive, and they told exactly what these waters could do. In 1741, HMS Wager was part of a British squadron that had to round Cape Horn to strike Spanish interests in the Pacific. The ships left England with over 1,900 men. By the time they reached the south, scurvy had already ravaged the crews. Then the weather closed in. For weeks, the fleet fought headwinds and towering seas. Masts cracked, sails tore, men were swept overboard. The Wager became separated from the rest of the fleet. Alone, she was driven west. The charts were incomplete. Visibility was poor. On May 14th, 1741, the ship struck rocks off Wager Island. The hull split. Those who survived the wreck reached ashore with no settlements, no rescue, and no passing ships. Discipline collapsed. A mutiny erupted. Starvation and exposure took lives. Of the 250 men aboard, only a handful would ever make it back to England. The lesson was clear. If a Royal Navy warship could be broken before even fully clearing Cape Horn, what waited beyond in the open passage was worse. Further south, there were no rocks to run aground on. There was only water, and when ships disappeared there, they left nothing behind. A Spanish warship enters the southern latitudes, the San Telmo, a 74 gunship of the line. More than 640 men aboard. She is bound for the Pacific coast of South America. In September 1819, she approaches the waters near Cape Horn. Then, she vanishes. There is no wreck report, no survivors, no final log entry. The last confirmed sighting places her near the South Shetland Islands, inside the storm belt that feeds the Drake Passage. After that, nothing. Months later, fragments are found on the shores of Livingston Island. Pieces of spars and sections of hull timber, evidence that a large vessel had been destroyed there. The water in that region hovers near freezing. When a hull fails in those temperatures, Survival time in open water is measured in minutes. There was no rescue possible in 1819. All 644 men aboard the San Telmo are presumed dead. No graves, no testimony, just wreckage scattered across a remote Antarctic shore. It is the closest thing the Drake Passage has ever produced to a ghost fleet, an entire warship swallowed whole, without leaving a story. January 1915. The expedition ship Endurance becomes trapped in the pack ice of the Weddell Sea. For months, the pressure builds. In November, the hull can no longer hold. The ice crushes the ship slowly. On November 21st, 1915, the Endurance sinks beneath the frozen surface. 28 men are left standing on drifting ice, thousands of miles from home. After months camped on unstable sea ice, the crew escapes in 3 lifeboats. In April 1916, they reach Elephant Island, isolated, uninhabited, outside normal shipping routes. No rescue would come on its own. Ernest Shackleton made a decision. He took one of the lifeboats, a 22-foot vessel named the James Caird, and planned to reach South Georgia Island, 800 nautical miles across the open Southern Ocean. It was the same system of wind and current that drives the Drake Passage. On April 24, 1916, 6 men pushed the modified lifeboat into freezing surf. There was no engine. Navigation relied on a sextant and brief sightings of the sun through cloud breaks. Captain Worsley later wrote that he managed only a handful of usable readings during the entire voyage. For 16 days, the James Caird rode heavy seas. Freezing spray coated the boat in ice. The men bailed constantly. Waves broke over the bow without warning. Sleep came in minutes, not hours. One small navigational error would have meant missing South Georgia entirely and drifting into the open Atlantic. They did not miss. On May 10, 1916, the James Caird struck the western coast of South Georgia. The men were exhausted, frostbitten, barely able to stand, but they were not safe yet. The whaling stations were on the opposite side of the island, separated by unmapped mountains and glaciers. Shackleton and 2 companions crossed the island on foot. 36 hours later, they reached the whaling station at Stromness. Months later, Shackleton returned to Elephant Island and rescued every man left behind. Not a single member of the Endurance crew was lost, but the margin between survival and disappearance had been measured in inches of freeboard and seconds between waves. Most ships entering these waters today are modern, steel-reinforced, driven by powerful engines. But the Drake still does not guarantee safe passage. There are days when it lies flat, low swell, light wind, a steady horizon between continents. Passengers walk the open decks without holding the railings. The sea looks almost cooperative. Sailors call it the Drake Lake. That is when it becomes deceptive. The same geography that allows calm can reverse in hours. Pressure drops, wind tightens, swell builds faster than forecasts predict. In November 2022, the expedition cruise ship Viking Polaris was heading north through the passage. It was a modern, ice-strengthened vessel, built specifically for polar waters. A single wave struck. It was estimated at around 50 feet. Windows shattered, and water forced its way inside. Passengers were thrown from their seats. A 62-year-old woman was killed. This was not a wooden hull rounding Cape Horn in the age of sail. This was a 21st century expedition vessel, and one wave was enough. There is something strange about this passage. 5 centuries, people have studied it on charts, tried to forecast it, tried to cross it, and at every era, with the best tools available, the sea has occasionally reminded them that understanding and control are not the same thing. Today, we have satellites, weather models, steel hulls, powerful engines, 10-day sea state forecasts, and yet the Drake Passage remains the Drake Passage, the place where the Southern Ocean funnels between 2 continents, the place where the wind has nothing to stop it, the place where ships have vanished without a trace, stories with no ending, logbooks never written, Names carved on no monument, just the water and the wind. And that particular silence the Southern Ocean keeps after it has taken what it has taken